Emily had always trusted Daniel. For years, she had believed in the life they built together, never questioning his loyalty or the way he managed their finances. Their marriage had been built on an unspoken agreement. Daniel handled most of the financial decisions, while Emily focused on her career and their home. It had worked well for them, or at least that's what she had thought. Lately, however, things had started to feel off. It wasn't just the subtle changes in Daniel's behavior, the longer work hours, the sudden trips, or the way he always seemed distracted. It was something deeper, a nagging feeling that had settled in the pit of her stomach, growing stronger with each passing day. At first, she had dismissed it as paranoia. After all, Daniel had always been a busy man. He had an important career, clients to manage, deals to negotiate. But then the signs became harder to ignore. One evening, as she was sorting through some emails on her laptop, a bank notification popped up on her phone. Normally, she wouldn't have paid much attention to it. Daniel was the one who handled most of their finances, but something about it caught her eye. A withdrawal of $1,200 had just been made. Confused, she scrolled through their joint account history. That was when she saw it. The transactions weren't just recent, they had been happening for months. $500 here, $750 there, sometimes as much as $2,000 at a time. None of these expenses had ever been discussed. They weren't mortgage payments, utilities, or investments. And most importantly, they weren't for her. Emily's heart pounded as she scrolled further. The pattern was undeniable, consistent withdrawals, all relatively small, but frequent enough to raise a red flag. Her breath hitched as the realization settled in. Daniel was hiding something from her. A part of her wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe they were business-related transactions. Maybe he was planning something, an investment, a surprise, anything but what her gut was telling her. But deep down, she knew better. That night, she tried to act normal, pushing down the growing sense of unease. As she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she listened to the rhythmic sound of Daniel's breathing beside her. He was fast asleep, his face calm and relaxed, as if nothing in his world had changed. But in Emily's world, everything felt different. At some point, she must have drifted off because the next thing she knew, she was waking up to an empty bed. The spot beside her was cold. Groggy and disoriented, she sat up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. The apartment was silent, but something didn't feel right. Then she heard it. A faint voice, low and hushed, coming from down the hall. Emily froze, her heart hammering in her chest. She strained to listen, barely making out the words. Just a little longer. She doesn't suspect anything yet. A chill ran down her spine. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She slowly slid out of bed, careful not to make a sound as she padded across the floor. The hallway light was off, but a sliver of moonlight streamed through the window, casting shadows along the walls. She followed the voice, her stomach twisting with every step. Daniel's back was turned as he spoke into his phone, his voice smooth, reassuring, as if he were calming someone down. Emily didn't need to hear the rest. She had heard enough. A name flashed across her mind. Olivia Monroe. She had never heard it before, never seen it in Daniel's contacts. But there it was, right there in the bank statements. Her fingers curled into fists as she took a step back. She needed to think. Confronting him now would get her nowhere. If he was planning something, she needed to know exactly what it was before she made a move. Barely managing to keep herself steady, she turned and made her way back to the bedroom. Sliding under the covers, she forced her breathing to remain slow and steady. A few moments later, she felt the bed dip beside her. Daniel had returned. She turned slightly, blinking up at him with feigned sleepiness. "Where were you?" He didn't even hesitate. "Bathroom." A lie. "And the phone call?" she asked, keeping her voice soft, groggy. Daniel barely flinched. "Just a client. Had to smooth out some details for a case." Emily studied him in the dim light. He met her gaze, unreadable as always, the way he had perfected over the years. For a second, she almost believed him. Almost. But then she remembered the words. She doesn't suspect anything yet. Swallowing hard, she rolled over, forcing herself to stay quiet. Not tonight. Not yet. The next morning, Daniel was still asleep when she slipped out of bed. Barefoot and careful, she grabbed her phone and walked into the kitchen. Her fingers trembled as she unlocked her banking app. The transactions were still there. The proof was undeniable. Emily exhaled shakily, gripping the phone tightly. Behind her, footsteps. She quickly locked the screen and turned just as Daniel leaned against the doorway, rubbing his neck. "Morning?" he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. "What's for breakfast?" Emily set her phone down, forcing herself to smile. "I was about to ask you the same thing." Daniel smirked and poured himself a cup of coffee. "Guess it's your turn then." She watched him take a sip, her mind racing. "I checked our bank account this morning," she said, keeping her tone casual. Daniel froze, just for a fraction of a second. His grip on the mug tightened before he forced a chuckle. "And? There are a lot of small withdrawals," she continued. "Things I don't recognize." Daniel barely hesitated. "Just small investments, a few business opportunities." Another lie. Emily nodded slowly, pretending to accept his answer. But inside, she was already making her next move. She wasn't paranoid. Something was terribly wrong, and she was going to find out exactly what it was. Emily sat at the kitchen table, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly as Daniel scrolled through his phone across from her. The previous night's conversation still played on a loop in her mind. His explanations, his feigned nonchalance. It was all too perfect, too well rehearsed. She had known him for years, and yet she had never felt further away from understanding the man in front of her. The realization was sobering. Daniel was planning something he didn't want her to see coming. If she wanted to protect herself, she had to act now. That morning, after Daniel left for work, Emily took a deep breath and grabbed her laptop. She pulled up her banking app again, this time not just to check transactions, but to take action. The numbers stared back at her, thousands of dollars withdrawn over the past 3 months, all without her knowledge. The unsettling truth settled in her chest like a heavy weight. Her first instinct was to freeze, to panic. But no, she wouldn't let herself be the victim here. If Daniel was planning to leave her, if he was truly trying to take everything, she needed to move first. Emily opened a new tab and started making calls. Her first call was to her personal bank representative. "Hi, this is Emily Carter," she said, keeping her voice as steady as possible. "I need to transfer my assets into a separate trust immediately." The banker hesitated. "Ma'am, are you sure?" "Your joint account with Mr. Carter." "Yes," Emily cut in. "I need it separated now." Within the hour, she had successfully moved her personal savings, stocks, and real estate holdings into a trust under her sole control. The money that Daniel couldn't touch, no matter how much he schemed. Her next call was to a financial attorney. She explained everything: the unexplained transactions, the late-night phone calls, the requests for financial information. "You did the right thing moving your assets," the lawyer assured her. "If your husband is planning something, you need to be ahead of him." Emily's stomach twisted at the confirmation of what she already suspected. Daniel wasn't just lying to her, he was setting up his escape, ensuring he left with everything while she was left with nothing. For the first time in years, she was grateful for her own financial independence. While Daniel had controlled much of their shared finances, she had always maintained her own investments, her own income sources. It had been a safety net before, something she never thought she'd truly need. Now, it was her lifeline. As she hung up the phone, her mind raced. She had secured her money, but that wasn't enough. She needed proof of what Daniel was doing, proof that he was attempting to manipulate the system in his favor. That night, she waited. Daniel came home, kissed her on the cheek like nothing had changed, and went about his usual routine. But Emily was watching. The way he casually placed his phone face down on the table, the way he hesitated before answering her questions about his day, the way he kept his laptop screen angled just slightly away from her. He was hiding something, and then he made a mistake. After dinner, Daniel got up and left his phone unattended for the first time in weeks. He never did that. Emily's pulse quickened as she reached for it, tilting the screen just enough to see a new text message flash across. "Olivia Monroe. Everything is set. Just make sure she doesn't see the paperwork." The air in the room felt suddenly too thin, too suffocating. Paperwork? Her hands trembled as she placed the phone back exactly as it was. She forced herself to breathe, to stay calm. He was hiding legal documents from her. Now she knew. She had been right all along. The next morning, Daniel was unusually cheerful. He poured her coffee, made small talk about their weekend plans, and then, just as casually as if he were discussing the weather, he slid a folder across the table. "Babe, I need you to sign something real quick," he said. Emily picked up the folder, keeping her expression neutral as she flipped through the pages. At first glance, it looked like tax paperwork, boring, routine, but then she turned to the last page. Property transfer agreement. Her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just paperwork. It was a legal document meant to sign over the majority of their assets into Daniel's name. Their condo, her savings, her investments, all of it. Her hands clenched around the papers. She looked up at Daniel, who was watching her carefully, a charming but calculated smile on his face. "What is this?" she asked, her voice even. "Just a precaution," Daniel said smoothly. "Consolidating everything for tax purposes. Nothing changes between us." He was lying. Again. Emily took a deep breath, willing herself to stay calm, to stay in control. "I'll need some time to review this," she said finally, placing the papers neatly back on the table. Daniel's smile twitched. "Emily, it's just paperwork." "If it's just paperwork," she countered, tilting her head, "then why are you so eager for me to sign without reading it?" For a fraction of a second, his jaw clenched. Then he let out a short laugh and leaned back in his chair. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Emily smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "I just think I need to be careful with my finances, don't you?" she said lightly. She watched as his entire demeanor shifted. He thought he was in control. He had no idea that she had already beaten him at his own game. That night, as Daniel acted like nothing was wrong, Emily sat in bed, staring at the ceiling. She had secured her money. She had uncovered the truth. Now, she just had to wait for him to make his next move, and when he did, she would be ready. Emily knew Daniel wouldn't take her resistance lightly. She had seen the flicker of frustration in his eyes when she refused to sign the property transfer agreement. She had watched his grip tighten on the coffee mug, his forced chuckle masking something darker underneath. But she had been prepared for his anger. What she hadn't anticipated was just how far he was willing to go. The first sign of trouble came subtly, almost unnoticeably. It started with strange looks at work, colleagues whispering in hushed tones as she passed, stolen glances that lasted just a second too long. At first, she brushed it off, thinking it was just paranoia. But then her assistant, Rachel, hesitated before stepping into her office one morning, her face tense. "Emily," Rachel began, shifting uncomfortably. "I don't want to alarm you, but have you heard what people are saying?" Emily frowned. "Saying what?" Rachel bit her lip before finally blurting out, "That you've been stealing money from your joint accounts." Emily's blood ran cold. "What?" "I don't believe it," Rachel added quickly. "But Daniel's been talking to people. Mutual friends, even some legal circles. He's saying you mismanaged funds, that you were hiding money from him." Emily exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of her desk. Of course. Of course he would do this. If he couldn't take her money legally, he would destroy her credibility instead. "I'm handling it," she said, forcing a reassuring smile. But inside, she was furious. It didn't stop at the office. Within days, Daniel escalated his attacks. He contacted lawyers, mutual friends, even old colleagues, spinning a carefully crafted narrative where Emily was the villain. He painted himself as the betrayed husband, the man blindsided by a greedy wife who had been funneling money into secret accounts. And then came the worst part. Her attorney, Patricia, called one morning with an urgent tone. "You need to come in," she said. "Now." Emily barely had time to grab her coat before rushing to Patricia's office. When she arrived, Patricia wasted no time. She slid a thick stack of printed emails, bank statements, and transaction records across the desk. Emily flipped through them, her stomach twisting into knots. "These are fake," she whispered. Patricia nodded. "We know, but Daniel and Olivia Monroe have submitted these as official evidence. They're claiming you've been falsifying financial records for months. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. This was serious. If the court takes these claims seriously, they could launch a criminal investigation, Patricia continued. Emily clenched her jaw. And the documents? Patricia exhaled. They're very good fakes, but they made one mistake, a big one. She pointed at a line on one of the bank statements. These supposed transactions, they date back 6 months, but the accounts they reference didn't even exist at the time. Emily felt a surge of relief. They forged the documents but didn't check their timestamps? Patricia smirked. Exactly, and that's enough to prove fabrication. Emily sat back, gripping the chair. Daniel had just made the mistake that would ruin him. She should have been relieved. But she wasn't, because she knew Daniel wouldn't stop here. He had committed too much to this. He wouldn't back down without a fight. That evening, as she sat in her dimly lit apartment, she felt the weight of exhaustion pressing against her shoulders. She had spent years believing she knew the man she married. Now, she barely recognized him. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated before answering. There was silence for a moment, then a familiar voice came through the line. You think you're so smart, don't you? Daniel. Emily's fingers tightened around the phone. What do you want, Daniel? He laughed, a low, bitter sound. You think this is over? You have no idea what I can do. A slow, icy calm settled over her. She leaned back in her chair. You've already lost, Daniel. His laughter stopped. I have proof that your so-called evidence is fake, she continued, her voice steady. And once the judge sees that, your entire case falls apart. Silence. Then, just before the call disconnected, Daniel muttered something that sent a chill down her spine. We'll see about that. Emily placed the phone down, staring at the screen until it went dark. She had won this round, but she knew Daniel had one last move left, and whatever it was, it wouldn't be pretty. Emily knew Daniel wouldn't walk away quietly. He had spent months setting this up, trying to strip her of everything. His false accusations, the forged documents, and the smear campaign against her weren't just desperate attempts. They were his last-ditch effort to take her down. But he had made a critical mistake. She had proof that the financial records he submitted were fraudulent. Patricia, her attorney, had already filed a motion to dismiss Daniel's claims. But Emily knew that wouldn't stop him. He wanted to exhaust her, to drag this battle out for as long as possible, hoping she would eventually break. She wouldn't. The day of the hearing arrived, and Emily walked into the courtroom with her head held high. Daniel was already there, sitting beside his attorney, looking as smug as ever. Olivia Monroe, his so-called business partner, was in the audience watching the proceedings unfold. Emily took her seat next to Patricia. The judge entered, and the courtroom fell silent. Daniel's attorney stood first. Your Honor, he began, his voice smooth, confident. We have reason to believe that Mrs. Carter has been funneling money into undisclosed accounts, intentionally hiding assets from our client. We are requesting a full forensic audit of all her financial records. Emily remained still, her face unreadable. The judge turned to Patricia. Does the petitioner have a response? Patricia stood, adjusting her glasses. Yes, Your Honor. She walked to the judge's bench, placing a thick folder on the desk. These are forensic reports conducted by a certified financial analyst, proving that the documents submitted by Mr. Carter and Ms. Monroe contain fabricated timestamps and transactions that never actually occurred. She turned slightly, looking at Daniel before continuing. In fact, Your Honor, several of these transactions were listed before the accounts even existed, a clear indication of document forgery. A murmur spread through the courtroom. Daniel's attorney shifted in his seat. Your Honor, we request time to review. You may not, the judge interrupted, his tone firm. This court takes fraudulent evidence very seriously. For the first time, Daniel's smug expression faltered. Emily watched as he gripped the edge of the table, his jaw clenching. Patricia wasn't done yet. In addition, Your Honor, we are filing a motion for dismissal with prejudice, given that the allegations were not only baseless, but deliberately fabricated to damage my client's reputation. She let her words settle before delivering the final blow. and we are requesting that Mr. Carter cover all legal fees incurred by my client due to this fraudulent claim." The judge nodded slowly, flipping through the evidence. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "The court finds no grounds for a full forensic audit," he said. "The motion is denied." Daniel's lawyer opened his mouth to protest, but the judge raised a hand to stop him. Furthermore, due to the submission of falsified evidence, Mr. Carter is hereby ordered to pay all legal fees incurred by Mrs. Carter. A sharp bang of the gavel sealed the decision. Daniel had lost. Completely. Outside the courtroom, Emily exhaled, feeling years' worth of weight lifting off her shoulders. Patricia patted her shoulder. "Well done," she said with a small smile. "He didn't see that coming." Emily turned just in time to see Daniel storm past her, his face red with fury. He didn't speak, didn't even look at her. But as he brushed by, she heard Olivia Monroe hiss in frustration. "You told me we'd win," she snapped at Daniel. Daniel didn't reply. Emily almost laughed. They had played the game together, and they had both lost. As she stepped into the fresh air outside the courthouse, she allowed herself to breathe. For the first time in months, she felt free. Daniel had tried to take everything, but in the end, he was the one left with nothing. As Emily stepped out of the courthouse, the crisp afternoon air filled her lungs. The trial was over. The legal battle that had consumed her life for months had finally come to an end, and she had won. The weight on her shoulders, the constant tension in her chest, all of it seemed to dissolve as she took her first real breath of freedom. Daniel had walked out moments before, his face pale with anger, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He didn't say a word to her. He didn't even look back. He had lost, and he knew it. The man who had tried to strip her of everything, who had meticulously plotted her downfall, was now the one walking away with nothing. And Emily? She had never felt stronger. The official documents were signed 2 days later. Her attorney, Patricia, handed them to her with a satisfied smile. "It's done," she said simply. "Daniel signed the settlement. He's forfeited all claims to your assets, and the court has ruled that he is responsible for covering all legal fees. You're officially free." Emily let out a slow exhale as she flipped through the pages. Every line of legal text, every signature at the bottom, was proof of her resilience. Daniel had tried to manipulate the system to turn the law against her, but he had underestimated her. "Does he have anything left?" Emily asked, setting the papers down. Patricia smirked. "Not much. He spent a fortune on legal fees, and with the court ruling against him, he's in a bad financial spot. Plus, the smear campaign backfired. His professional reputation took a hit. No firm wants to touch a lawyer who fabricates evidence." Emily didn't gloat, didn't celebrate Daniel's downfall. She had never wanted revenge. All she had ever wanted was to protect what was hers. Now she had. That evening, Emily found herself standing on the balcony of her apartment, a glass of wine in hand. The city stretched out before her, lights twinkling in the distance, life moving forward as it always did. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about Daniel. She wasn't worrying about what he might do next. He was no longer a part of her world. Her phone buzzed beside her, a message from her closest friend, Beatrice. "Dinner tomorrow? We need to toast to your freedom." Emily smiled. Yes, she thought. It was time to celebrate. She had spent months fighting, planning, defending herself against someone who had once sworn to love her. Now she could finally let it all go. She texted back a simple response. "Absolutely." A week later, Emily sat across from Beatrice and a few other close friends at an upscale restaurant. Glasses clinked together as they toasted to her new beginning. "To freedom," Beatrice grinned, "and to never letting a man think he can outsmart you again." Emily laughed, raising her glass. "I'll drink to that." As the conversation flowed around her, she allowed herself to soak in the moment. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into this mess months ago. That version of Emily, the one who had trusted too easily, who had let someone else control her finances, who had ignored the warning signs, was gone. In her place stood a woman who had fought back, who had outmaneuvered a man who thought he could take everything from her. A woman who had won. As she walked home later that night, a light breeze brushing against her skin, she realized something else. She had no regrets. Everything she had gone through, the betrayal, the legal battle, the stress, it had all led her here, and she had come out on the other side stronger, smarter, and completely in control of her life. Her phone buzzed again as she reached her door. Unknown number. She hesitated for only a second before swiping to block it. She didn't even need to check. She already knew it was Daniel, and she had nothing left to say to him. This was her story now, a story of survival, of resilience, of a woman who refused to be destroyed. Emily had not lost Daniel. She had escaped him. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all. Emily's story is more than just a battle against betrayal. It's a testament to resilience, intelligence, and the power of taking control of one's own destiny. She didn't let herself become a victim. Instead, she adapted, planned, and protected herself when it mattered most. In doing so, she proved that strength isn't about avoiding adversity, but about how you rise after it. Her journey teaches us some invaluable lessons. Always be aware of your financial standing. Never place blind trust in someone else to manage your assets. Financial independence is not just about money, it's about security and freedom. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, don't ignore it. The red flags are there for a reason. Stay calm and strategic in the face of deception. Emotional reactions can be used against you, but knowledge and preparation will always be your greatest weapons. The best revenge is success. Walking away with your dignity, your assets, and your future intact is the ultimate victory. If this story inspired you, subscribe to our channel for more empowering and thought-provoking content. Help us continue sharing stories that remind you of your strength and ability to overcome any obstacle. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. There's so much more to come.